This unlucky high schooler just became the latest target for Truck Coin, and when he finally wakes up, he's in a completely different world, a classic Isekai setup. What he doesn't know yet is that he's got an insane hidden perk, the Eternal Youth. The story then opens in a medieval-style fantasy world, where a teenager named Rio is lying on the floor of a tiny, run-down cottage. The place is empty except for a couple of old books and a knife sitting lonely on a table. Rio shrugs them off, steps outside to breathe in the mountain air, and takes a look around. All he sees are endless peaks rising up everywhere. Curious, he lifts his hand and quietly mutters, "Water come forth," and like magic, a small pool of water springs up in his palm. Flashback to just a few days earlier, Rio suddenly finds himself suspended in a bright, endless void. Confused, he's met by an angel who's quick to read his thoughts, assuring him this is not some afterlife checkpoint. The angel, who admits it's been ages since he's seen a guest, is both happy for the company and a bit bummed, since Rio died after the infamous Truck Kuan accident. Rio, putting two and two together, realizes he's in line for reincarnation. He straight up asks the angel, who he decides to call Michael in his mind, what he's supposed to do in his next life. Michael tells him to just live however he likes. Rio always wanted a slow, boring life, so after getting Michael's blessing, he gets ready to be reborn in a new, magical world called Phi. But before he goes, Michael breaks down the basics. Only 1/5 of people here can actually use magic, but Rio is one of the lucky few especially gifted with water abilities. Since Rio wanted a boring life, Michael sets him up in the forest of Rondo, far from crowds, with a small cottage and 2 months' worth of food stacked in a cold storage house. Inside the cottage, there are 2 handy guidebooks, one about the local plants, the other on the monsters he might run into. And when it comes to learning magic, Rio remembers Michael's advice. All you need is imagination and practice. He's also safe from forest monsters for now, since Michael put up a barrier around the house. He then gives water magic another try, and with just a thought, he makes a perfect water ball appear in his hand. No chanting, just pure focus. And honestly, it's a pretty sweet setup for someone who just wanted to take it easy in another world. With a quick flick of his magic, Rio then plugs up the bathtub with water. Honestly, it's a bit gross if you think about it, because the water technically comes straight from inside him. And to make things worse, it's freezing cold. Now he's got a new problem: how to heat it up. He tries the old school way, rubbing sticks together to spark a fire, but after multiple failed attempts, he just gives up and starts thinking if there's a magical shortcut. Remembering his chemistry classes from his past life, Rio decides to separate hydrogen and oxygen from the water, but instead of making fire, the whole thing freezes up and turns into solid ice. Staring at the ice, Rio has a light bulb moment. He uses the ice like a magnifying glass to focus sunlight, and with some luck, he manages to get fire going. Finally, he gets the water nice and hot and takes a long, relaxing bath. While soaking, his mind starts to clear, and he suddenly realizes he could have just used magic to heat the water in the first place by reversing the process he used to make ice. But he'll save that trick for next time, because for now, it's time to eat. During dinner, Rio thinks about his limited food stash. He knows he'll need to start hunting soon, but the idea of going to the forest freaks him out. He's pretty sure that little knife Michael left him won't do much against monsters, so now he's got to unlock some offensive magic. The following morning, Rio gets to work on his very first offensive spell, Water Ball. But the results are underwhelming. The attack does nothing to the tree he's aiming at. He tweaks the spell, making the ball thinner and sharper, almost like an arrow. After hours of trial and error, he finally manages to create a simple water jet, but even that can't scratch the tree. Not one to give up, Rio spends the following day experimenting with ice magic instead. He carefully forms an ice crystal, but quickly learns that levitating ice is a lot tougher than water. Still, he keeps at it for hours and eventually figures out how to summon multiple ice crystals at once. But the only problem is that he still can't get them to actually launch at his target. After days of trial and error, Rio finally gets the hang of forming ice crystals instantly, but still doesn't have the power to actually fire them as projectiles. Still, with his food running low, he makes do by using an ice crystal as a makeshift spearhead. He heads into the forest. By the riverbank, he spots some quartz and grins, knowing it'll be useful for making fire if he ever runs out of mana. While searching for medicinal herbs, Rio gets ambushed by a monster, a lesser boar that clearly sees him as easy prey. The beast charges straight at him, and for a second, Rio totally freezes, his feet glued to the ground. His Isekai adventure nearly ends before it even gets started. But at the very last second, the fear of dying all over again kicks in, and he leaps out of the way. This time he thinks fast, using magic to freeze the ground and send the boar sliding. In the chaos, he summons several sharp icicles right in the boar's path, and the beast ends up impaled and finished off. Desperate times really do bring out the best in him, because Rio manages to pull off some clutch water magic right when he needs it. Not a bad effort, but he's still got a long way to go. Back at home, Rio cracks open the monster compendium and immediately learns that lesser boars are basically the weakest monsters around. He spends extra time flipping through the pages, trying to get ahead of anything he might run into next. When he reaches the section on dragons, the only advice is to run if you ever spot one, not that it'll help, since he'd almost definitely die anyway. Still, he's told to at least try to escape. Turning the page, he lands on Akuma, an even worse nightmare. For this monster, the book doesn't bother giving any survival tips. All it says is to pray you never cross paths with one. The more he reads, the less helpful the book seems, but he powers through. You'd think his last hunt would keep him inside for good, but there's only so much time a guy can spend indoors. The next day, he pulls himself together and heads out again, ready for whatever this world might throw at him. And the day starts with optimism because Rio discovers a tree loaded with fruit. The first bite is so good it almost makes up for all the stress from the day before, but his luck doesn't last. Out of nowhere, an assassin hawk swoops down and knocks him flat. It's immediately clear that this hawk is way stronger than he is, and there's no chance he can win in a straight fight. The hawk even uses invisible air magic, leaving Rio completely defenseless. Remembering advice from his monster book, he tries to run, but there's no way he's outrunning a damn hawk. Realizing he can't escape, he turns to face the hawk. Using his ice magic, he manages to trap the bird. Thinking he's finally won, he gets closer, only for the hawk to break out injured but alive, one eye now damaged. Once the hawk realizes Rio isn't as weak as he thought, it bolts. Rio collapses in relief, complaining that this slow life he wanted is anything but slow. Trying to get home after the fight, Rio realizes he's completely lost thanks to his mad dash from the hawk. As he stumbles through the forest, something freaks him out even more. A headless Dullahan with smoke pouring from its neck, calmly tending to its horse. But somehow, Rio eventually finds his way back home. As days pass, he keeps training and leveling up his skills. From fighting monsters to fishing, his water magic gets so strong he can slice through mountains with it. He keeps pushing himself to get tougher, and slowly he's starting to adjust to this new life. But every night he returns to the same spot where he found the Dullahan, challenging it over and over, not to win, but maybe just to grow stronger. There's no info about Dullahans in his monster compendium, so he wonders if it's not a monster at all, or if it's just not in the beginner's guide. After another failed duel, Rio admits the only reason he keeps coming back is because it feels like the Dullahan is actually helping him get stronger. One night, he watches as the Dullahan creates an ice sword, holding out toward him as if offering a gift. Taking the hint, Rio accepts the sword, and with that, the Dullahan leaves him in peace. For the next several days, or maybe even weeks, Rio finally enjoys a stretch of calm, but the peace doesn't last long. One day, while training, he spots a familiar figure. The vengeful hawk is back. He instantly notices it's missing an eye, so there's no doubt it's the same bird he fought before. But now it's turned completely black, and it looks much bigger than last time, which means it's evolved. The hawk charges at him, faster and stronger than ever. Rio instantly calls up his 5-layer ice wall, but the hawk smashes through it like it's nothing, so he quickly summons a 10-layer ice wall, but the bird breaks that down too. Desperate, Rio attacks with multiple ice crystals, but the hawk uses some kind of magic negation to wipe them out and closes in on him. Then suddenly, Rio senses something in the air, so he leaps aside, and at this moment, Rio's stick gets reduced to ashes by a surprise lightning attack. So in the heat of the moment, he grabs the sword he got from the Dullahan and goes after the hawk. This time, the sword actually works. He lands a hit, forcing the hawk back, but it isn't done yet. The bird lunges at him again, and with a final thrust, Rio pierces it with the blade and the hawk collapses. Rio approaches the fallen bird, admitting that it's one of the most persistent creatures he's ever met. He realizes that the hawk evolved just for this rematch, and as a sign of respect, he lets it die by his hand. Removing the sword, he watches as the hawk finally passes away. Rio continues his journey, completely unaware that a dragon is nearby. Suddenly, a dragon appears and starts speaking to him, and Rio is stunned that he can understand a dragon's voice. The dragon, glad to have his telepathy working again, asks Rio if he's seen an evolved hawk. Rio explains he just killed one. The dragon is surprised that a human could defeat it, so Rio shows him the sword. Instantly, the dragon recognizes it as the sword of the Fairy King and asks what Rio did to deserve it, but Rio has no idea. With the dragon's curiosity satisfied, Rio takes his turn asking questions. The two chat until late before the dragon announces he needs to leave. But before parting ways, Rio introduces himself and the dragon shares his name, Lewin. Things are actually going pretty well for Rio in this new world, so well that the angel who reincarnated him checks his heavenly records again and realizes he missed something huge. Rio has a secret ability that the angel never noticed before, the power of eternal youth. Meanwhile, down by the riverbank, we see a mysterious boy with red hair lying in the sand next to a wrecked boat. Later, Rio suddenly gets an intense craving for seafood, so he casually strolls down to the beach. But the moment he arrives, his eyes widen in shock at the massive shipwreck sprawled out before him. He rushes forward, quickly noticing a man lying next to the busted-up vessel. Rio kneels to check on him, only to find out the poor bastard's already kicked the bucket. But then he hears a faint groan nearby, and excitement floods through him because this is the first living human he's encountered since arriving in this world. The survivor named Abel recalls fragmented memories of a massive octopus-like monster attacking his ship during a violent storm, causing him to plunge into the sea. But when Abel wakes up, he's surprised as hell to find himself chilling in some stranger's house. Confused but grateful he's alive, he quickly bolts upright, panicking as he searches for other survivors. When Abel staggers outside, he's even more confused, realizing he has absolutely no clue where the hell he is. Just then, Rio appears quietly behind him, startling Abel because despite being a seasoned warrior, he couldn't sense Rio's presence at all, and he is also equally stunned by Rio's bizarre fashion sense, though he decides to politely avoid mentioning it for now. Instead, he introduces himself properly and thanks Rio for saving him. Rio awkwardly replies that Abel was the only guy still breathing and the rest were already fish food when he got there. Abel quickly assures him not to stress about it, casually revealing those guys were just sketchy smugglers anyway, but before he can say more, his stomach interrupts him with a loud growl. Laughing awkwardly, Rio suggests they continue the chat over some food. Abel follows him inside, but nosy-ass Abel immediately brings up Rio's bizarre clothing. Rio explains that he simply has no other clothing and lacks materials to craft new ones. So Abel casually advises him to just buy some, but immediately feels awkward, thinking Rio might be too poor to afford new clothes. But Rio quickly eases Abel's guilt trip by explaining he's literally the only human living in this godforsaken place, so there's nobody to sell him clothes anyway. Abel then gets curious, asking if Rio hunts to get his grub. Rio casually nods yes, and Abel curiously asks if he uses that dinky little knife he's got. With a smirk, Rio demonstrates his impressive water magic, mentioning that magic is his primary method for hunting. Abel is astonished, revealing that only about half the world's population can use magic, and he himself unfortunately belongs to the half that can't. This surprises Rio because the angel had told him that just 20% of people possess magical abilities. Afterward, Abel requests that Rio take him down to the shore as there's something important he needs to verify. On their way down to the beach, Abel suddenly tries to act all heroic, telling Rio to stay behind him if they encounter any danger. Rio calmly replies that it's not necessary, but Abel insists, clearly not wanting to feel like some helpless damsel in distress. Rio allows him to do as he wishes, and soon they reach the wrecked ship, but all the bodies have mysteriously vanished. Abel figures either the monsters or the sea already took care of them, then awkwardly thanks Rio again, knowing his ass would have met the same fate without him. Abel grumbles a bit, mentioning that he couldn't find whatever the hell he was looking for and says that right now his priority is meeting back up with his crew. Problem is, the storm knocked his ship far south to God knows where, leaving him completely unsure about which way to go next. Then Abel suddenly perks up, turning to Rio and casually asking if he'd like to tag along. Rio is surprised by this sudden invitation, and Abel quickly explains that he could use Rio's help to find his way back, and in return, Abel could hook Rio up with a decent job in the city, one where he might not have to dress like Mockley anymore. After thinking it through, Rio eventually agrees to guide Abel back. Later that evening, Rio stands quietly looking at the garden he's painstakingly grown, feeling a strange pang of sadness at the thought of leaving all his hard work behind. That night, he tells Abel he's heading out to say goodbye to someone important. Abel raises an eyebrow, obviously curious who the hell Rio could be meeting in the middle of nowhere, but decides not to pry, probably sensing it's none of his damn business. Afterward, Rio walks over to the lake to find the headless knight, standing by the quiet waters. He announces he's leaving the forest for a long time. He thanks the knight for all the training, then dramatically whips out his knife, promising to go all out one last time. Without a word, obviously since the dude has no head, the knight draws his sword, ready to throw down. Rio charges in hard, delivering blow after blow like he's in the final scene of some epic anime fight, driving the knight backward relentlessly. Eventually, Rio exhausts himself, panting heavily as the knight silently retreats into the lake again. Catching his breath, Rio offers one final heartfelt thank you, but of course the knight keeps silent. Just as Rio's about to leave, the knight unexpectedly turns around and magically summons a badass armored suit straight out of the water, apparently his parting gift. Rio gets embarrassingly sentimental at the gesture, choking out another thank you before heading back home. The following day, Rio and Abel gear up to set out on their journey. As they get ready, Rio finds himself surprisingly nostalgic about leaving the isolated place he's called home for so long. Soon after, they encounter a wild boar in the forest, and Abel quickly asks Rio to leave it to him. He rushes toward the boar with his sword drawn, swiftly unleashing a combat skill that instantly turns the poor animal into a shish kebab. Amazed, Rio asks what exactly combat skills are, and Abel explains that they're special techniques used by those who fight using weapons. That night, they camp inside a large hollow tree, and the next morning they continue their journey through the forest. As they approach a swamp, they spot several lizardmen roaming around. Abel decides it's best to avoid them and suggests changing their route, since lizardmen can be quite strong opponents. But even after they shift their path, Rio senses the creatures still pursuing them from behind. Abel immediately prepares to fight, but Rio warns him that there are too many enemies this time, insisting he'll use his magic as well. Abel doubts Rio can fight without his staff, but he's left stunned when Rio instantly blasts 4 lizardmen at once with icicle lances. After the battle ends, Abel questions Rio about the spell he just cast. Rio casually replies that it was just a regular icicle lance, but Abel insists his wind mage friends are limited to casting only 1 attack at a time, while Rio effortlessly summoned 4 icicles simultaneously. Rio shrugs it off, suggesting maybe it's just a limitation of wind magic because it's totally normal for water magic. Abel decides not to dwell on it too much, suggesting they continue their journey. But before moving forward, Rio creates 2 ice glasses and magically fills them with water. Abel notices Rio used a different incantation this time, but Rio quickly covers it up by saying that he must have misheard him earlier. As they keep traveling, Abel hands Rio a coin, and Rio excitedly claims this is the first time he's ever seen actual money. Abel is speechless, as he always assumed Rio was poor but never imagined he was that poor. He then begins explaining to Rio about the 3 major nations within the central provinces: the Kingdom of Nightly, the Debui Empire, and the Handaliu Federation. Rio immediately starts roasting the Debui Empire just because he finds its name ridiculous. And while he continues joking about the Empire's absurd name, they reach a wide clearing. But just then, a rock near them moves on its own, startling both of them, so Abel quickly draws his sword and slices it neatly in half, and Rio swiftly conjures a water barrier to deflect the barrage of flying stones. Abel realizes with dread they've accidentally wandered into a nest of rock golems. Confused, Rio wonders aloud if golems aren't supposed to be more humanoid-shaped, but Abel decides they've got bigger problems to handle first. Charging forward, Abel punches a hole straight through the nearest golem, but to his surprise, the golem instantly regenerates, returning fire immediately. Abel swiftly retreats, grimacing, and warns Rio that conventional attacks won't do much against these things. However, Rio suddenly gets a clever idea. Summoning a massive block of ice midair, he casually drops it right on top of the golems, crushing them flat. Abel's jaw nearly hits the ground in shock, having never witnessed such a ridiculously effective spell before. Rio, thoroughly pleased with himself, repeats the ice block maneuver a few more times, effortlessly clearing out the rest of the golems. After the dust settles, they find one particularly special rock golem embedded with a large magic stone, and Abel excitedly notes that such a stone would fetch a great price. Rio wistfully says he'd love to grab the magic stones from the other golems too, but sighs dramatically, admitting he's either too lazy or honestly too clueless to melt all the ice again. Continuing their journey, they soon stumble upon an enormous crocodile hippo creature sprawled out before them. Abel gasps in awe, calling it a behemoth, a ridiculously rare and powerful monster he's only heard legends about. Rio eagerly asks if they should hunt it, but Abel quickly shakes his head, insisting they don't stand a chance. Just then, a group of wyverns swoop down from above, capturing Rio's attention immediately. He's excited to witness an epic monster showdown. Moments later, the wyverns waste no time launching magical rocks at the behemoth, but the beast simply roars defiantly, canceling out their magic and sending the wyverns tumbling to the ground. Impressed, Rio casually tells Abel that the massive creature likely has some sort of magic cancellation skill. Later that night, over dinner, Abel curiously asks Rio about the magic cancellation skill, since he'd only heard of certain dungeon traps having such a powerful ability. Rio's eyes sparkle at the mention of dungeons, excitedly demanding to know more. Abel casually mentions there's a dungeon in the city of Loon exactly where they're heading. Rio dramatically loses it, annoyed that Abel didn't bother mentioning something so crucial earlier, and playfully interrogates him about any other secrets he might be hiding. Abel awkwardly asks if Rio at least knows about dwarves and elves, but Rio urges him to fill in the details anyway. After a few days, they finally reach a sprawling mountain range, and Rio confidently says they'll find some human settlement just beyond those mountains. Abel raises an eyebrow skeptically, asking how Rio can be so damn sure. Rio briefly considers telling Abel about that dragon he casually chatted with, who conveniently spilled all the secrets of this world, but decides against it, and he settles instead on dramatically replying that it's knowledge beyond human comprehension. Just as Abel's about to call him out on his cryptic nonsense, they suddenly hear a strange noise nearby. Instantly, they both tense up, weapons at the ready. Seconds later, a massive monster, a freaking griffin, soars down from the sky straight toward them, prompting both boys to freak out spectacularly. Abel immediately goes into full panic mode, his mind racing with ways they're about to become bird food, but Rio swiftly saves their skins by tossing a hefty chunk of meat high into the air. Abel quickly copies him, hurling another chunk skyward, so the griffin eagerly snatches both pieces mid-flight and casually flies away, clearly uninterested in human-flavored snacks. After a tense pause, they both exhale deeply, relieved that they're not dinner tonight, and they admit shakily that picking a fight with something like that would have ended terribly. As they continue onward, Abel starts rambling about how nobody's even seen a behemoth or a griffin in over a century, suggesting the tall mountains might have kept these powerful creatures from reaching populated areas. That reminds Rio that the wyverns they saw earlier came from the north, meaning their nest must be nearby. As usual, Rio's instincts are spot on, as they soon stumble upon a small group of wyverns munching on some unfortunate monster. Rio eagerly suggests fighting them, but Abel quickly shuts him down, warning him that it typically takes at least 20 experienced adventurers to handle creatures as tough as wyverns. Rio shrugs calmly, reminding Abel they'll inevitably have to face strong monsters eventually. Then with a mischievous smile, Rio asks if pinning them to the ground would make things easier for Abel. Abel cautiously agrees, saying if they're grounded, he can handle one or two up close. Without hesitation, Rio dramatically steps forward, loudly chanting a deliberately exaggerated fake spell before casually summoning 4 icicles that stab through the wyvern's wings, pinning them in place. Abel doesn't waste the opportunity and swiftly leaps forward, ending their misery. But before they can celebrate, 2 more wyverns swoop in aggressively. This time, Rio instantly summons more icicles, but without bothering with any flashy chanting. Abel notices immediately, casting a suspicious glance at Rio, but decides to save the questions for later. After dispatching the new threats, they gather the magic stones from the defeated wyverns and continue their journey northward. If you enjoy the recap, make sure to let me know down in the comments. And of course, don't forget to drop a like, share it with your friends, and hit that subscribe button. Most importantly, turn on the notification bell so you're the first to catch the next episode as soon as it drops. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.